Welcome back to the solutions to the logical reasoning section of the free LawPrep. We've seen that the logical reasoning section of the LSAT India primarily tests you on your ability to understand an argument and its structure. Now, the argument that is contained in the problem could either be strengthened or weakened by a couple of additional facts or premises. In this video, we will deal with some problems that illustrate as to how an argument could be either strengthened or weakened. Let us have a look at the problems.
Next question, it asks you as to which one of the following most helps to undermine the argument, which means most helps to weaken the argument. I want you to try the question by yourself, but before that I want to remind you something about the mindset that I believe you should have when you're solving the LSAT India problems. Look, when you're solving a question, don't think that you're just solving a single question. That's not what it is. There's much more to that. You are learning the method, okay? There's a certain mindset that is required, a certain approach that is required for you to do well in the LSAT. Let me give you an example, a lame example that I give often. But let's say if there's a question, okay, in your mathematics paper which says that if one mango costs 20 rupees, then what is the cost of 5 mangoes? Okay. Now, if you're asked this question, you can kind of say that maybe it is 90 rupees because you can bargain and reduce 10 rupees. I mean, this is not wrong per se because that's what we do. Or if someone says if one mango is 20 rupees, then what is the cost of 5? You can say, hey, that a pack of 5 maybe comes with a carton, so it is 110. I mean, this is again not wrong, but you know from practice that the exam is not asking you what you will go and do in a shop, right? It tells you that there's a certain kind of mindset. So when you go in the examination hall and you say, hey, if one is 20 rupees, then my mom buys 5 for 90 rupees. So 90 is the answer. Then when you get your examination sheets back and you find that someone has struck this off and you get 0 marks for that out of 10, then you realize, oh, I should not have done this. The next time you are asked a question, if one coconut costs 10 rupees, what is the cost of 10 coconuts? You know this time that you're supposed to say 100. Okay, which means that you use a question that you get wrong, not only to learn how to solve that question right, but to use this as a window to understand the mindset and the expectations of the exam itself. Okay, so there's a certain kind of expectation that this exam has, and you are required to meet that. This is where I always say, take a question, try always solving it by yourself. When you see that you've gotten the answer wrong, this lets you know as to where your mindset is not aligned with the LSAT India. It doesn't mean you're foolish. Remember this, okay? It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you don't know how to solve it. It just means that you're not acquainted with this method. You've not practiced it enough. If you practice and if you allow yourself to learn from the questions that you're attempting, you will find that very soon you're able to get the questions right. This, I believe, is the ideal mindset when you are practicing LSAT India problems. The questions that you get wrong are your best teachers. Okay? Therefore, pause the video, try solving the question yourself, see what your answer is, and then you can look at the solution that I will be presenting to you in a bit. So we're basically looking at which of these options most weakens the argument given here. Let us begin by looking at the argument. So I've represented this as 3 sentences for better clarity. Let's read it together. It says, technological improvements in the precision of clocks and other means of measuring time have repeatedly helped to increase productivity by improving synchronization amongst workers. Okay. It says now we have devices capable of measuring time more precisely than ever before. Okay. However, the increased precision in measuring time due to these devices will probably not result in increased productivity, since increases in precision will occur only at levels too small for people to perceive. Let's look at this in a little detail now. If you've read these sentences, I think it's quite clear that the first sentence tells you that there have been improvements in technology for measuring time precisely, and this increased precision has helped increase productivity by something because of improving synchronization, but you don't need to bother about that. Basically, it's saying improvement in precision of measurement of time has helped increase productivity. Next sentence says, now, today, we have the ability to measure time very precisely, more than ever before. The third sentence says, however, this increase in precision will probably not increase in productivity. And then it gives you the reason for that thereafter. Now, here's a very, very important thing, especially when you see words such as now. It kind of indicates to you that there's a timeline that you need to think of. And this is a tip that you use not just for this question, like I said, but for several questions in the LSAT India, because you will see that there's a certain kind of pattern that is being followed. So when I talk about a timeline, let's kind of put what we see in these sentences here into a bit of a timeline. Okay, let's say we are now is maybe the 2020s. Okay, let's say this is 2022 and we are here now. Okay, and then let's say there was some time in the past, 1900s, 1950s. Okay, now this is the timeline, and you saw, according to the first sentence, that during this phase the improvement in the technological improvements with increase in precision and helped increase productivity. And then you come to the phase now when we've gotten very precise. Okay, it says, however, that this increased precision, right, in the time to come will not really help in improving or increasing the productivity. So you're saying that while there has been an improvement in the technology, you're saying now this increased precision is not going to help productivity, because now the increase is happening at levels too small for people to perceive. Okay, which means maybe earlier you had a clock that could measure only up to minutes, then it could measure up to seconds, then you could measure up to milliseconds. Now maybe it can measure even 1,000th of a millisecond, but hey, do we as people, normal people, do we kind of engage with those kind of numbers? Does it matter to us that something is maybe 100th of a millisecond late? So it's saying that, hey, although clocks can measure that time, it's not really going to help us with productivity. This is what the argument is. Now, in this argument, you see this thing which reads, will probably not result in increased productivity. This gives you an opinion, okay? And when you see an opinion, that is most likely the conclusion of the argument, okay? So basically what we saw is that a further increase in precision will not increase productivity because the increase in precision is too small for people to perceive. And this is your premise. So the argument is clear that increased precision will not lead to increased productivity because people cannot perceive the increased precision. Now here's the time for you to again remind yourself as to what you are here for. You are here to undermine or weaken the argument. How would you do that? Okay. Take a moment and pause the video and think of how you would undermine this argument. Because I want you to first have something in your mind that you expect, that you anticipate before you go and look at the questions. Okay. So if I tell you that human perception is not needed for improved productivity, does this affect the argument adversely? Does it weaken the argument? Let's say earlier you could measure up to milliseconds. Okay. Now you can measure up to 1,000th of a millisecond. Okay. Maybe you don't know, or humans may not be able to perceive it. Okay. However, there might be a machine that can perceive this, and that results in greater productivity, because productivity doesn't always just mean that people have to perceive it, right? So a weakness in this argument is that maybe human perception is not needed for improved productivity. When you've been able to find this, let's go to the options and see if there's something similar to this in the options. Right, we are here to now weaken or undermine this argument. The argument here is saying that increased precision will not result in increased productivity. So what we are looking for is one of the statements in here that says that, hey, an increased precision will result in increased productivity. Right? This is what we're looking for. The second thing is that we want that this should happen without relying on the human ability to perceive it. Pause the video and try to identify the answer by yourself. Okay, I'm giving you the answer. The answer is E. It says modern devices for measuring time can increase productivity. So you have this here, it increases productivity by improving the synchronization of computerized machinery, which means that there is an increase in productivity, but it does not rely on the human ability to perceive it. It relies on the synchronization of computerized machinery. Now, maybe you might not be very convinced with my solution to this question. Maybe you feel that it looks reverse engineered. It's kind of like I knew the answer and therefore I could kind of think of what was required to arrive at this answer. And I hear you. You're not wrong if you said that. While I really didn't look at the answer and then solve the question, what I have done and what kind of gives me a certain kind of wisdom or a certain additional sense while solving the LSAT India questions is that the fact that I've solved numerous questions. When you solve enough LSAT India questions, you will be able to see that there's a pattern of sorts, right? And therefore, if you haven't practiced enough questions, this will look like it is kind of far-fetched and very difficult, or that maybe I'm just looking at the answers and then solving this out for you. But that's not the way it is. Assess yourself after having solved at least one complete paper. Go solve this free mock test on the official LSAT India website. It's available for free. You can take it under timed conditions. You will get the answer key thereafter. You will get your grade sheet. You'll see how many questions you've gotten right and wrong, and then you can assess yourself thereafter. Do not be someone who's simply watching these videos like this is going on OTT. That's not going to help you. Okay, let's move ahead. Right, try solving the question yourself and then we'll go for it together. So what I'll do here is what I discussed a little while back about skimming through this really quick. Okay, let's do this together. It's likely that the internal sense of time is genetically based. Okay, two recent studies of mice by researchers have evidence for the claim that a gene is responsible for the internal clock. Okay, there's a gene for the internal clock. Although the gene was not isolated, it seems that the cause is genetic. Now, if my expectation, if my target had been to completely understand this while reading at this pace, then I would have felt disheartened. But if I kind of look at it differently, I'm like, hey, I spent 3 seconds and in 3 seconds I gave myself an idea of what is happening. This is way better than what you would find yourselves doing other times. You know what you'd see? Very often what I see students doing is that you read it once, then you go like really slow. You go like, it is likely. And you go again. It is likely that the internal sense of time. This is very, very bad. Look, there are two ways of missing out on something because of the speed. The first is if it's too fast. So you missed the bus because it's too fast. The second thing is you will also not comprehend if it is too slow. Remember that you are maybe 17, 18 if you're writing the LSAT as undergraduates, older if you're taking for the PG. You definitely understand this, okay? You've read better things than this. You've read newspapers. You don't need to go that slow. You've read a lot of text already. You may be writing your board exams. So don't give yourself things at a pace so much slower than your pace of comprehension. So when your expectation, however, when you're reading this fast, I was talking about skimming. When you're reading it fast and all you want is to get an idea of what's happening, you'll find that in 3 seconds you have an idea. Okay, and then we can go and do this in a little more detail. Skimming is a very important starting point. Let's go ahead. Right, so we have 3 sentences here. And as I told you, in understanding the structure of an argument, it always helps to first identify the conclusion. Now, the conclusion is either indicated through words like so, therefore, thus, hence, or you would find that in the form of an opinion. So you kind of look through the passage to see as to where you can find some words or phrases that are introducing an opinion, and what follows is likely to be the conclusion. Right. So when you see the word likely, these words are indicative of the conclusion. So you can see that in 1 as well as kind of in 3, you can find the conclusion that the sense of time in humans is genetically based. The second sentence says that there's an experiment conducted on mice, 2 recent studies on mice by reputable researchers in different laboratories. So it talks of 2 experiments, okay, have evidence for the claim that the single gene is responsible. Okay, so 2 experiments tell you that the genes are responsible. So wow, you have reputable researchers and they're conducting 2 studies. So that kind of tells you that, this is really so. It lends credibility. Okay, and the third sentence basically tells you that although the gene was not isolated, the conclusion was drawn. Let us go ahead and look at the options now. But if you look at the options without a sense of purpose, without knowing where you're going, without a guiding beacon, you just end up reading the options and getting lost in there. So let us remind ourselves why we are going to the options. We are going to the options to look at something that weakens the argument here. Okay. Now you could either invalidate or weaken this argument based on its conclusion. So maybe you can find that maybe there were 2 experiments conducted here, okay, and that they gave a certain conclusion, but maybe there was another experiment that gave another finding that, hey, you know what, this is not genetically based. So you can weaken the conclusion through maybe another finding that was done elsewhere or anything else that can weaken the conclusion. Another thing that you could do is that you could weaken it by challenging the experiment. You could maybe say that, hey, the experiment was conducted on mice, but the result was concluded on humans. So maybe if something points towards this could weaken it. Maybe you can say, hey, 2 pieces of research, 2 experiments are too little, 2 is too less, okay? Or maybe you can say that something about one of the 2 experiments was unreliable, or maybe both the experiments were unreliable, okay? So you're now looking in the options for something that can weaken it in some way. Now we know what we are looking for, and when that is the case, you will find yourself being a lot more acute, a lot more actively engaged when you're looking at the options. Let's go for it now. Right, so we've seen in what ways you could weaken this, right? Based on what we've understood together, I'd like you to pause the video and try identifying the answer by yourself. Do not look at the solution until you've given it your attempt. You'd find in many cases, and that's true with everyone including myself, that you may still get the answer wrong, okay? But when you see what the right answer is, after having given it some thought by yourself, you'd be able to identify your mistake. If you directly look at the answer and the solution, you would never be in a position to see why you're getting things wrong, okay? So give yourself that chance to benefit from this. You've invested so much time watching this entire video. You're definitely preparing, so you might as well do it the right way. Pause the video, try it by yourself, and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, so the answer is option C. Option C reads that the researchers who conducted one of the experiments relied almost exclusively on the data obtained by the researchers who conducted the other one. So you see, it spoke of 2 studies, 2 experiments, right? And I said that this also could be one of the ways in which you attack it. So you had 2 studies, but it turns out that one of these researchers obtained a certain kind of data. Now, why do you want a second one? Like, what is the significance of a second study? A second study means, hey, someone independently assessed the same thing and they also found that out. So for example, let us say you have a certain document and you want 2 people to be available for testifying it, okay? Why do you want 2 people? Because hey, 2 is better because 2 independent people have verified this. So here it says that, hey, if we have 2 studies, it kind of shows that the findings are very credible. But what this does is it says that, you know what, the people who conducted the second study just used the data of the first, which means the second study will also end up pretty much saying what the first study said. So you don't really have 2 studies, you know. The second study is basically just mimicking the first study, and therefore it weakens this because it weakens the basis of the argument. It weakens the experiment. It weakens the foundation upon which the argument was built. I hope you understand that, and you will get better as you practice more and more. Let us move ahead.